Chapter 1: A Trap to Catch a Witch. It was a warm night for November, too warm a night for witches, or so the story said. Witches were supposed to be extinct, of course, but Czar had heard about the way that they stank, and he imagined he could smell that now in the quietness of a dark forest. A faint but definite stink of burning hair mixed with a long dead mice, and a little kick of viper's venom, once smelled, never forgotten. Czar, pronounced Czar, I don't know why the spelling is weird, was a wild young human boy who belonged to the wizard tribe. He was riding on the back of a giant snowcat in a part of the forest so dark and mangled and tangled that it was known as the Bad Woods. He should not have been there, for the Woods were warrior territory, and if the warriors were to catch him, well, what everyone said was that Czar would be killed on sight, off with his head. It was the pleasant warrior custom, but Czar did not look even remotely worried. He was a cheerful scruff boy with a tremendous quiff, a hair shooting upward from his forehead, as if it had accidentally come into contact with some invisible hurricane. The snowcat he was riding was called King Cat. There's a picture of King Cat and Czar. A noble creature who was a giant form of lynx, far too dignified for his cheeky master. King Cat had shining paws so round that they looked unreal, fur so deep that it was like a powdered snow, and such a rich silver-gray color that it was almost blue. The snowcat ran swiftly but softly through the forest, his black-tipped ears swiveling from side to side as he ran, for he was scared, although too proud to show it. Only that very moment, Czar's father, Encanzo, the enchanter king of wizards, had reminded everyone that it was forbidden for any wizard to dare set one toe in the Bad Woods. Czar meant well, but he was the kind of kid who acted first and thought later. And that kind of kid is often in trouble. In fact, he was the most disobedient boy in the wizard kingdom. In about 4 generations, and forbidding things only encouraged him. In the past week, Czar had tied the beards of 2 of the eldest, most respectable wizards together when they were sleeping at a banquet. He had poured a love potion into the pigs' feeding trough so that the pigs developed a mad, passionate crushes on Czar's least favorite teacher, and followed him around wherever he went, making loud, enthusiastic squealing and kissing noises. He had accidentally burned down the western trees in the wizard camp. Most of these things hadn't been entirely intentional. Spooked snowcat looking around, perfectly safe clearing. Oh, that's right there. I read that a little too early. Most of these things hadn't been entirely intentional. Exactly. Czar had just gotten carried away in the heat of the moment. And yet, none of these disobedient things was half as bad as what Czar was doing right now. There was a large black raven flying above Czar's head. "This is a very bad idea indeed, Czar," said the raven. The talking raven was called Caliburn, and he would have been a very handsome bird, but unfortunately, it was his job to keep Czar out of trouble, and the worry of this impossible mission meant that his feathers kept falling out. It isn't really fair to lead your animals and sprites and young fellow wizards into all this danger. As the son of the king enchanter and a boy with a great deal of personal charisma, Czar had a lot of followers. A pack of 5 wolves, 3 snowcats, a bear, 8 sprites, an enormous giant called Crusher, and a small crowd of other wizard youngsters all followed Czar as if hypnotized, all shivering and scared and pretending not to be. "Oh, you worry too much, Caliburn," said Czar, pulling King Cat to a halt, jumping off his back. "Look at this lovely pretty little glade here. You see, perfectly safe, and exactly the same as the rest of the forest." Czar looked around with breezy satisfaction, as if they had stopped in a delightful wood dell filled with frolicking bunnies and baby deer, rather than a cold, eerie little clearing, where the yews leaned in threateningly and the mistletoe dripped like warlocks' tears. The other wizards drew their swords, and the growling snowcat's fur stood up with the fear to such an extent that they looked like furry little puffballs. The wolves padded restlessly, trying to form a protective circle around their humans. Only the smaller sprites shared Czar's enthusiasm, but that was because they were too young to know any better. I don't know if you've ever seen a sprite, so I'd better describe these ones to you. There were 5 larger sprites, all faintly resembling a human crossed with a fierce, elegant insect. When irritated or bored, which was often, they blinked on and off like stars, and purple smoke drifted out of their ears. They were so see through that you could watch their hearts beating. Then there were 3 smaller, younger ones who, because they were not adult yet. And then this is Ariel. And this is little Squeeze Joes. And then Bumble Boozle. And then there's the baby. So then there were 3 smaller, younger ones who, because they were not yet adult, were known as hairy fairies. Czar's favorite was an eager, slightly stupid little thing called Squeeze Joes. Oh, it's lovely, Squeak Squeeze Joes. It's a tremendously loveliest clearing I've ever seen. What's this fascinating flower? Let me guess. It's a buttercup. It's a daisy. It's a geranium. It's a cauliflower. He flew into the upper branches of a particularly gloomy and sinister tree and perched on the edge of one of its fleshy flowers, which had ominous spikes on the ends of its leaves and was in fact called a sprite-eating hobtrap. The flower snapped shut in the briskness of the briskness of a mousetrap, capturing poor little Squeeze Joes inside. Caliburn landed on Czar's shoulder and gave a heavy sigh. I don't like to say I told you so, said Caliburn, but we've only been in this perfectly safe little clearing in the Badwoods for 1.5 minutes, and you've already lost one of your followers to a carnivorous flower. Nonsense, scolded Czar good-naturedly. I haven't lost him. It's the whole point about being a leader. Whenever my followers get into trouble, I rescue them, because that's what a leader does. Czar climbed the tree, and 200 feet up, swaying precariously on a couple of creaky twig-like boughs, he took out his dagger and popped open the sprite little eating hobtrap to release the panting Squeeze Joes. Just in the nick of time. It's fine, Squeeze Joes. I'm fine. I can't feel my left leg, but I's fine. Don't worry, Squeeze Joes. That's just a hobtrap's digestive juices. The feeling will return in a couple of hours. Czar called out as he dropped down from the tree. You see, I am a great leader. Stick with me and you'll be fine. The wizard youngsters looked very thoughtful indeed. At that moment, Czar's older brother, Luder, came out of the shadows behind them, sitting astride a great gray wolf and followed by even more sprites and animals and young wizard followers than Czar himself. Czar stiffened because he hated his older brother, Luder. Luder was a lot bigger than Czar, and he was nearly as tall as their father. He was brilliant at magic. He was good-looking and clever, and my goodness, didn't he know it. He was the smug wizard you could possibly imagine, and he often snitched on Czar to get Czar in trouble. What are you doing here, Luder? Stormed Czar suspiciously. Oh, I just followed you to see what unbelievably stupid and pointless thing my little baby brother was doing this time, drawled Luder. Great leaders like me don't do pointless expeditions, fumed Czar. We're here for a reason, it's none of your business. Czar considered telling Luder some elaborate lie about what he was doing, but he couldn't resist showing off. We're going to catch ourselves a witch, boasted Czar proudly. Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. This was the first time Czar had mentioned to his followers the purpose of his expedition, and it was very unwelcome news indeed. A witch? The bear, the snowcats, the wolves, they all went very still and began to shake. Even Ariel, the wildest and most unafraid of Czar's sprites, shot up in the air and momentarily disappeared. There are witches in this part of the Badwoods now. I know it, whispered Czar excitedly, as if a witch were a delightful sort of present that he was offering everyone. There was a long silence, and then Luder and his wizard followers began to laugh. They laughed and they laughed and they laughed. Oh, come on, Czar, Luder said at last, once he'd gotten his breath back. Even you must know that witches have been extinct for centuries. Ah, yes, said Czar. But what if some of them survived and have been hiding all this time? Look. Here's what I found in this very clearing only yesterday. Out of his rucksack, he carefully took an absolutely gigantic black feather. It was huge, like the feather of a crow, but much, much larger. A soft black fading at the end to a glowing, shiny, dark green, the color of a mallard's head. It's a witch feather, whispered Czar. Luder smiled, his most superior smile. That's just the feather of some big old bird. That, scoffed Luder. Some giant crow. You get some weird things living in the bad woods. Czar frowned and hung the feather from his belt. I've never seen a bird as big as this one. Must be, said Czar grumpily. It's all nonsense, smiled Luder. Only a brainless fool like you wouldn't know that. Witches were destroyed forever. Caliburn flapped downward and landed on King Cat's head. Forever is a long word, said the raven. You see, said Czar triumphantly, Caliburn is a bird of omen who can see into the future and into the past, and he doesn't think that witches are gone forever. All I know is if witches were not to be extinct for some reason, you wouldn't want to go meeting one in a dark place, said Caliburn, shivering. What do you want a witch for, Czar? I'm going to catch the witch, said Czar, and remove its magic and use it for myself. There was another horrified silence. Eventually Luder spoke. That, little brother, is the worst plan I have ever heard in the whole history of plan making. You're just jealous that you didn't think of it, said Czar. I have a few questions, said Luder. How are you going to catch the witch in the first place? That's what the net's for, said Czar, taking a net out of his rucksack and holding it up. You couldn't fault his enthusiasm. At least one of us will volunteer to be wounded ever so slightly, and then the blood will attract the witch. Oh, great, smiled Luder. Now you're going to wound one of your sad little followers? In a forest stuffed with raving werewolves and blood-sniffing ogre breath? Come on, you're completely crazy. This plan is as pathetic as you are. Czar ignored him. And then I'll entangle the witch in this net when it attacks. Next question. Okay, question 2, said Luder. No living wizard has ever seen a witch, so how can you know what one looks like? Czar opened his rucksack and took out a book the size of a large atlas entitled The Spelling Book. Every wizard is equipped with a spelling book given to him at birth. Czar's was looking extremely worse for wear. One part of it was invisible. It accidentally got dropped into an invisibility potion. Another bit was burned so black that you could barely read it. This happened when Czar set the wizard camp on fire. And many of the pages were loose, dropping out all over the place. Too many adventures to go into here. Czar opened the book to the contents page, which had 26 letters of the alphabet written onto it in a very large old gold script. Czar spelled out witches by tapping on each letter in turn. Whoo! The book turned its own pages, which seemed to go on forever and ever, and the chapters in front turning invisible as the book rifled through the rest of them like an endless pack of cards, until eventually they stopped at the right place. That's weird. It doesn't say what they look like. But they're green, I think, said Czar. Someone else thought witches could turn invisible, and they had acid blood. Another thought that they squirted blood through their eyes. I'm sure that we'll recognize one when we see it, said Czar, impatiently shutting the spellbook. They're supposed to be pretty horrible, aren't they? Awesomely horrible, said Caliburn gravely. The most terrifying creatures that ever walked this earth. So even if you do catch this witch, how will you persuade it to part with its magic? Asked Luder. I'm imagining that the invisible green acid blood squirting witches, the most terrifying creatures that ever walked this earth, will not give up their magic if you ask them pretty please. Aha, said Czar craftily. I've thought of that. With a grand flourish, he put on some gloves, reached into his rucksack, and took out a small saucepan. Silence again. You do realize that that's a saucepan, said Luder. This is no ordinary saucepan, said Czar cunningly. And then he took a deep breath before he made his shocking announcement. This particular saucepan is made out of iron. Most of the wizards took a horrified step backward. The sprites let out shrieks of alarm. Luder alone refused to be impressed. In fact, he laughed so hard at Czar, he thought he might fall over. This is too good. You're going to fight a witch with a saucepan? Sneered Luder. You're no great leader, Czar. You're a liar and a loser. Our father is ashamed of you, and now I know why you're so keen to steal magic from a witch. There's a spelling competition, at the winter celebration tonight, and you can't do magic, Czar. Czar can't do magic, taunted Luther. Czar turned red with embarrassment and then white with anger. The fact that he couldn't do magic yet was one of those hidden stories that you didn't want anyone else to see. Wizard children were not born with magic. Their magic came when they were about 12, and Czar was 13, and his magic still had not come yet. Czar had tried doing magic for countless hours. He had tried and really tried. Really simple things like moving stuff with his mind, but it was as if it were a muscle he didn't really have. Relax, everyone said. Relax, it will happen. But it was like trying to move something with arms that weren't there. And recently he had begun to worry, what if it never happened? It was an unlikely calamity, but what a disgrace to the whole family it would be if a child born to the king enchanter had no magic. The thought of it made him feel a little sick. Poor little baby Czar, crooned Luther cruelly. There's a picture of the saucepan. Iron. Thinks he's such a big boy, but he can't do any magic whatsoever. My magic will come in, hissed Czar. But in the meantime, I swear, he spat, eyes so small with anger that he could barely see out of them. I swear, I'm going to catch a witch, and I will squeeze so much magic out of that witch, Luther, that I will blast you out of existence. Oh, yeah, grinned Luther. He reached into his rucksack and he took out one of his staffs. A wizard's staff was about the size of a walking stick, and wizards concentrated magic through them. Your spelling won't work on me when I am carrying iron, roared Czar, rushing forward to hit Luther with the saucepan, which was perfectly true, but most unfortunately, in his charge forward, Czar tripped over a long tangle of bramble, and his gloved hands lost their grip on the saucepan, and it went sailing over Luther's head and into the undergrowth. Luther pointed his staff at Czar and whispered the word of a spell under his breath. Luther's body trembled as the magic quivered through him and channeled out of his hand and into the staff, which concentrated it into one quick, fierce, hot bolt of magic that blasted out of the end of the staff, hitting Czar on the legs. Czar stopped mid-charge, his feet stuck to the ground by Luther's spell. Ha 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 ha, laughed Luther's followers. Remove the spell, shouted Czar, struggling to shift his feet. But it was as if they had turned to lead. No, I don't think I will, smiled Luther. Czar lost his temper. He snapped his fingers. Rah! Before anyone could blink or think, King Cat launched himself at Luther, huge jaws agape. 840 pounds of silvery gray killing machine. Screaming in terror, Luther was pinned up against a tree trunk, looking aghast at the great cat's nightmare face, inches from his own, and what felt like 4 kitchen knives sinking into his shoulder. They had already drawn blood. None of Luther's own sprites or animals had time to move or protect him. One more click of my fingers, spat Czar, and King Cat will take off your head. Cheat, panted Luther. You cheated. You're not supposed to use animals to attack a fellow wizard. Remove the spell, shouted Czar. Luther was now every bit as angry as Czar himself. But what could he do? He pointed his staff at Czar and removed the spell so that Czar's feet could move. And then Czar made a signal to King Cat to let Luther go. You're mad, a lunatic, raged Luther, as King Cat dropped him, and Luther gazed in astonishment at the 4 neat bleeding puncture wounds in his shoulder. Your animal has bitten me. If you dare to enter that spelling competition, I am going to annihilate you. Luther turned to Czar's followers. Who wants to come with me rather than stay here with this silly little madman and his stupid witch trap? Shouted Luther. One by one, Czar's followers backed away from Czar and toward Luther, and climbed on board their wolves or snowcats, muttering things like, Sorry, Czar, this is a bit too crazy even for you, and if witches aren't extinct, they are bad magic, Czar. We shouldn't be here. You see, crowed Luther triumphantly, crowed Luther triumphantly, a great leader has to have someone to lead, and no one wants to follow a magicless lunatic. Good luck with meeting your witch, what loser boy. And then Luder rode away on the back of his wolf, followed by most of the other wizards. Cowards, roared Czar, nearly crying. He was so angry. He ran into the undergrowth to retrieve the saucepan and then shook at his fist at their departing backs. We'll show you. We'll catch a witch. We'll take magic from it, and then we'll be so magic that we'll fly without wings. Czar turned with a sigh to the bedraggled remains of his followers. What did Luder always have to, or why did Luder always have to spoil everything? Czar had hardly anyone left now. Only 3 young wizards whose magic hadn't come in either, a girl called Heliotrope and 2 boys, Rush and Darkish. A large lad with even larger ears who had reached an age of 17 without showing any signs of magic whatsoever, and who was slightly on the dim side. Brother, he's left me with the losers, tutted Czar. Here I say, Czar. That's a bit unfair, protested Rush. Will we really fly without wings? Said Darkish, flapping his big arms up and down. Of course we will, promised Czar, rubbing his hands together excitedly, for Czar could never stay down so long. Those cowards, they're going to be so sorry they left. Darkish, the biggest, so you need to do the most... Oh, Darkish, you're the biggest, so you need to do the most digging, ordered Czar. Rush, I'm afraid we're going to have to wound you a little bit to tempt a witch to come to the trap. If anything goes wrong, and I thought you said this mission was completely safe, said Rush suspiciously. Well, nothing is entirely safe, said Czar. Czar backtracked quickly. Life is dangerous, isn't it? After all, you could get killed just climbing a tree like I nearly was just now. This is not just climbing a tree, sputtered Caliburn from above the 3 young wizards, and they began to obey Czar's orders. This is intentionally trespassing on warrior territory, trying to set a trap for the scariest life form that has ever walked the planet, Caliburn sighed. Nobody was going to listen to him. Caliburn perched rigid on the tree branch, with his head under his wing, as if for as long as he was buried his head under there, if he couldn't see the future would not happen. But of course, the old bird knew what would not work. Here's our sprites. So, have any of you ever had a time where maybe like a friend or your older sibling ruined one of your plans, even if it wasn't a good idea? Think about that. What kind of connections can you make to Czar and Luder?